Welcome to Unit 6 on What Makes Good Writing. Our agenda for today revolves around the current status of writing instruction, seeking expert advice, and what constitutes high-quality writing. If we look at the Common Core State Standards, again, as we've talked about before, there's that shift from narrative writing to more argumentative and explanatory or informational and informative writing. These writing tasks were not ranked as having much emphasis by a 2015 study from the University of Colorado by Todd Sundin. So despite these requirements within the middle and high school years, still classrooms are sluggish at implementing curriculum to meet these writing expectations. The needs of writers demand a greater depth of analysis. So writing is something that really requires a closer look. Much like we do close reading, writing demands are more and more greater, especially with different kinds of formats, genres, and evolving digital texts that are out there today that students will not only have to read but also to write themselves. There's ample occasions for sustaining compositional pieces in order to persuade, analyze, interpret, and there's more opportunities for composing pieces that involve synthesized knowledge and even evaluation. And so these varying opportunities and needs for writing demand different approaches to be able to achieve these needs. Some of these include these 11 elements to improve writing. The first is looking at writing strategies, such as summarization, collaborative writing, specific product goals, word processing, sentence combining, and even pre-writing and additional inquiry activities, the process of writing, study of other models to learn from exemplary writers in terms of their style and techniques of writing, sentence composition and structure, as well as writing for content learning itself. In a conversation with Dr. Steven Pinker, who's a leading writing researcher, it wasn't surprising to learn that he always suggests that we use words that actually precisely meet our target agenda. Meaning, instead of saying sexy, you would say voluptuous. And instead of saying emotional, you might say haunting. This is what we mean by having writers use judicious word choice in terms of the vocabulary words in which they use in their writing. You want to look at uncommon words, sort of those tier 2 words that are a better fit and more pleasing to the ear. Oftentimes, people use the word very or extremely, and they use adverbs, when in actuality they should actually just use a precise adjective or verb itself without the need for a modifier at all. Stephen King's advice furthers, an opening line should invite the reader to begin the story. It should say, listen, come in here. You want to know about this. So my question to you is, when is the last time that you forged ahead in a book whose opening failed to demand your attention? And I think the answer is very rarely, unless it's required for some class or schoolwork or work in general. And so you shouldn't just use random introductions or opening lines, because you have the ability to either welcome or repel a reader. And sometimes outlandish statements, even in titles such as cursive writing no longer exists. These sort of things welcome a reader in order to, because you pique their curiosity and they want to satisfy that inkling to find out what it is that you're talking about. Stephen King continues, he says, established in the first sentence that author's voice, it's the ability to capture or repel a reader. For me, a good opening sentence begins with voice. You hear people talk about voice a lot when I think they really just mean style. People come to books looking for the voice. An appealing voice achieves an intimate connection. And so I really think that if you can connect to a character or the narrator or an experience that they're doing, there's something about that again attracts the reader to continue with the rest of the piece. So our essential question for today revolves around, have schools neglected writing development in general? And if so, what can be done to rectify these current circumstances? So we're going to look at what constitutes good writing. Oftentimes people say it's in the eye of the beholder, or in this case, the teacher oftentimes, since he or she has the ultimate say and grade ability to grade and evaluate accordingly. So it depends on the intended audience, right? A good explanatory piece to a professor is probably going to sound quite different than explaining something to a middle schooler about why they need to practice writing. So you might write a letter to your mother or the president or Dr. Martin Luther King or a friend or a teacher, etc. And they're all going to be written in a different style for that particular audience. It also varies in terms of the mode of writing in question, meaning if you're writing a short story or a persuasive essay, good writing differs, especially when we talk about poetry and research reports. So there's a multitude of perspectives, and in short, there are many good definitions of what constitutes good writing. So obviously that's frustrating for many of us because we too oftentimes look for formulas and, sort of 2 + 2 = 4. Well, there's not, X + Y = a good piece of writing. It really depends upon the task at hand, but there are ways to encourage writers to develop along the way. And we're going to look at some common characteristics that guide this process. So Ruth Colum's 6+1 writing traits, those really revolve around what constitutes good writing. And this 6+1 characteristic traits will actually be guiding the rest of this semester because they're going to be the topics of study within the next several units. So these revolve around ideas, organization, voice, sentence fluency, word choice, conventions, and the presentation of your writing. So the first, ideas. Those are the focal points of your writing. What are you trying to say? Not necessarily something earth-shattering, but it's still the ideas that you're trying to contribute to the overarching theme of that piece of work. The second, as we talked about, is organization or the flow, in terms of does it have a logical sequence or structure to how you're going to write it. If you think about a dissertation, that is very organizationally sound. There's a structure, there's a rhyme and a reason and a flow to that, as opposed to a poem that might be constructed very differently. So again, organization depends upon the task at hand for your writing exercise. So what the heck is flow anyway? English types they're like metaphors. They're encompassing of all sorts of different components, which makes it difficult to define and complicated to achieve. However, creating flow involves using logical connections between ideas, strong topic sentences and transitions to link sentences, as well as concise wording and varied sentence structure. So your writing style, such as this guy right here, it really allows you to use your personality to tell the story or provide information in an article about what's the writer's main voice. So you're hearing my voice right now, but within that piece of writing, particularly nonfiction in this case, other voices might share the storytelling spotlight. Those voices can be other researchers, other people who have created these videos for this particular unit, and so that they're able to share in that dialogic piece. An example, when one must write an essay for college English, one must always take care to use appropriate punctuation and spelling. So that type of voice is sort of an authoritarian or somebody who's trying to direct you towards that end result. Secondly, essays should give you an idea of what's important to you, and that importance should be reflected in the attention given to mechanics. So again, that's a particular type of voice that might welcome some people to the reading, while others it might repel. Sentence fluency really consists of the sentences and the ways in which those are easy to read, they sound natural, and they have a flow again. So varying your sentence structures in order to have a particular flow to it allows you to achieve sentence fluency. Word choice, as we've talked about before with vocabulary and precision, is appropriate to the context of that work. So challenging words based on the writer's level of ability may be useful, or they might take away from the reader's understanding of that piece. So words should move the reader based upon authorial purpose, meaning forceful words in a persuasive essay are oftentimes perfect for your end result. And then we have conventions, as you know, which is the spelling, grammar, punctuation, and the mechanics with which we write. These are some of the ones that we learned in our English classes in elementary and middle school in particular. So the components of conventions can be broken down according to sentence formation, usage, and mechanics. And some of us are stronger than others these areas, but I think particular attention to these allows for the reader to focus on the meaning and not necessarily according to the mechanics. So the mechanics are there to allow you to focus on the meaning. And finally, let's take a look at a quick quiz. Do you know the differences, and do you know what the different meanings are in affect versus effect, and ensure and ensure and assure, peaked and peaked, a lot, illicit and illicit, then and then, farther, further? All these sorts of examples sort of remind us that we have to pay particular attention to the words that we use and the meanings of those intended words.